The dust storm had been raging for 3 days straight, turning the Wyoming sky into a brown curtain that blocked out everything but the faintest hint of sun. Mary Lou Barrett pressed her back against the weathered boards of the abandoned church, her threadbare shawl doing little to shield her from the biting wind that carried sand like tiny needles against her skin. She'd been walking since dawn, after Mrs. Hartley had thrown her meager belongings out the boarding house window. "Don't need your kind here," the woman had spat, her face twisted with the same disgust Mary Lou had seen too many times before. "Worthless virgin, they call you, well, virgin or not, you're worthless all the same." The words still stung, though Mary Lou had heard worse, in every town from Kansas to here. The whispers followed her like tumbleweeds, stories twisted and retold until even she sometimes forgot which parts were true. All because she'd refused to give herself to a man who'd promised marriage but delivered only shame. Her stomach cramped with hunger. 3 days since she'd had anything more than creek water and the half-rotten apple she'd found by the road. The church offered no real shelter. Its roof had caved in years ago, but at least the walls blocked some of the wind. Mary Lou closed her eyes, trying to summon the strength to keep moving. Where? She didn't know. Another town meant another set of suspicious eyes. Another boarding house that would eventually turn her out. At 23, she felt ancient, worn down like the rocks scattered across the prairie. The sound of hoofbeats made her eyes snap open. Through the swirling dust, she could make out a figure on horseback, moving steady despite the storm. Her first instinct was to hide. Experience had taught her that lone women and lone men rarely meant anything good, but there was nowhere to go, and her legs felt too weak to run. The rider drew closer, and she could see he sat tall in the saddle, his hat pulled low against the wind. When he was maybe 20 feet away, he stopped, studying her for a long moment before dismounting. "Ma'am," he said, touching the brim of his hat. His voice was rough, like he didn't use it much. "Storm's getting worse. You got somewhere to shelter?" Mary Lou lifted her chin, trying to summon what dignity she had left. "I'm fine, thank you." He looked at her, really looked, taking in her torn dress, her dusty hair, the way she swayed slightly on her feet. "No offense meant, but you don't look fine. You look like you're about to blow away with the next gust." "I said I'm fine." The words came out sharper than she intended, fear making her voice crack. The man, she could see now he was maybe 35, with weathered features and kind eyes, held up his hands in a peaceful gesture. "Name's Ethan Callahan. Got a ranch about 5 miles north. I'm heading back there now." "Good for you," Mary Lou said, though her throat was so dry the words barely came out. Ethan studied her another moment, then walked back to his horse and pulled something from his saddlebag. A canteen. He held it out to her, keeping his distance. "At least take some water." Pride warred with thirst. Thirst won. She took the canteen with shaking hands and drank deeply, the cool water like heaven on her parched throat. "When's the last time you ate?" he asked quietly. She didn't answer, just handed back the canteen. Ethan sighed, running a hand through his dark hair. "Look, I got 2 daughters at home. Maggie, she's 7, and little Ellie just turned 4. Their mother—" He paused, his jaw tightening. "She passed last winter. Fever took her." Mary Lou wasn't sure why he was telling her this. "I need help," he continued. "Someone to cook, help with the girls, keep the house. I can offer food, shelter, and fair wages. Nothing improper," he added quickly, seeing her tense. "You'd have your own room, out in the old bunkhouse. It's small but solid." "Why me?" The question came out before she could stop it. "You don't know anything about me." "I know you're out here alone in a dust storm with nowhere to go." Ethan said simply, "I know you're too proud to beg, but too smart to turn down honest work. And I know my girls need someone who understands what it's like to—" He trailed off, then started again. "Someone who won't give up easy." Mary Lou wanted to laugh. Give up. She'd given up 100 times in her heart, but her stubborn body kept going anyway. The people in town, they'll talk. They always do. You don't want that for your daughters. Let them talk, Ethan said, and there was steel in his voice now. I've got a ranch to run and 2 girls who cry for their mama every night. I need help, and you need work. Seems simple enough to me. It wasn't simple. Nothing ever was. But Mary Lou thought of another night spent hungry, another town that would chase her out, and found herself nodding. I don't know much about children, she warned. You'll learn. He moved back to his horse, then paused. You got belongings. She gestured to the small bundle beside her, everything she owned in the world. Ethan tied it to his saddle, then looked at her expectantly. Well, storm's not getting any lighter. Mary Lou stared at the horse. I'm supposed to... Unless you'd rather walk 5 miles in this dust. There was the faintest hint of humor in his voice. Don't worry. Buttercup here is gentle as they come. You can ride behind me. It took 3 tries to get her up on the horse. Her legs were shakier than she'd realized. Ethan waited patiently, then swung up in front of her with practiced ease. You'll need to hold on, he said over his shoulder. Trail gets rough in places. Mary Lou hesitated, then wrapped her arms around his waist. He smelled of leather and tobacco and something clean, like soap. It had been so long since she'd been close to anyone without fear that she had to blink back sudden tears. They rode in silence through the storm, Ethan guiding the horse with sure hands while Mary Lou tried not to think about what she was doing. Taking a position with a widower, living on his property. She could already hear the whispers it would create, but what choice did she have? After what felt like hours, but was probably less than one, shapes emerged from the dust. A house, modest but well-built, a barn that had seen better days, a few outbuildings scattered around, and there, pressed against the window, 2 small faces watching. That's them, Ethan said unnecessarily. Maggie and Ellie. As they drew closer, Mary Lou could see the older girl, Maggie, had her father's dark hair and serious expression. The younger one, Ellie, was fair-haired with huge eyes that seemed to take up half her face. Ethan dismounted first, then helped Mary Lou down. Her legs nearly buckled, but she managed to stay upright. Girls, he called as they approached the house. This is Miss Barrett. She's going to be staying with us, helping out. Maggie's eyes narrowed with suspicion. We don't need help. Maggie? Ethan's voice held a warning. It's all right, Mary Lou said quietly. She knelt down, bringing herself to the girl's eye level. I understand. If strangers came to my home, I'd be cautious too. Ellie peeked out from behind her sister. Are you going to be our new mama? The innocent question hit like a physical blow. Mary Lou saw Ethan's face tighten, saw Maggie's expression turn fierce. No, Mary Lou said gently. I'm just here to help your papa take care of you, cook your meals, mend your clothes, maybe tell you a story or 2 if you'd like. Do you know any good stories? Ellie asked, stepping slightly forward. A few, Mary Lou admitted. About princesses and dragons and girls who save the day. Girls can't save the day, Maggie said, but there was less hostility in her voice now. Sure they can, Mary Lou said. Girls can do all sorts of things people don't expect. Ethan cleared his throat. Why don't we get inside before this storm gets worse? Miss Barrett needs to get settled. The house was tidy, but had an air of sadness about it, like it was holding its breath. Everything was clean, but nothing felt quite alive. Mary Lou recognized the feeling. It was the same way she'd felt for months after... Kitchen's through there, Ethan was saying, pointing. Bedroom's upstairs. I'll show you the bunkhouse after the storm passes. For tonight. He looked uncomfortable. There's a small room off the kitchen. Used to be for storage. It's got a cot. You can stay there until we can get the bunkhouse ready. That's fine, Mary Lou said quickly. Thank you. An awkward silence fell. Finally, Ethan said, Girls haven't had supper yet. There's beans and some cornbread from yesterday. If you're hungry. Mary Lou's stomach clenched at the mention of food, but she kept her voice steady. Why don't I warm that up for everyone? Might as well start earning my keep. You don't have to. I want to, she interrupted. Then, softer. Please, I'd like to. Ethan nodded slowly. All right then, girls, why don't you show Miss Barrett where everything is? Maggie looked like she wanted to protest, but Ellie was already tugging at Mary Lou's skirt. The big pot is up there, she said, pointing to a high shelf. Papa has to get it down for us. Well, let's see if I can reach it, Mary Lou said, grateful for something to do with her hands. As she worked, warming the beans and slicing the stale cornbread, she felt 3 sets of eyes watching her, evaluating, judging. It was familiar and uncomfortable all at once. Papa says Mama used to sing while she cooked, Ellie offered suddenly. Mary Lou's hands stilled for just a moment. Did she? That must have been nice. She sang pretty, Maggie said. And for the first time, her voice was just that of a little girl missing her mother. Do you sing? Not very well, Mary Lou admitted. But I can hum a little, if you'd like. So she hummed, an old tune her own mother had sung, back when the world was kinder, and slowly. The kitchen began to feel less like a tomb and more like a place where people lived. By the time she served the simple meal, the storm outside had intensified, rattling the windows, but inside, in the warm glow of the oil lamp, something fragile and tentative had begun. Not trust, not yet, but possibility. Ethan ate quietly, occasionally glancing at her with those steady eyes. The girls were less subtle in their observation, especially Maggie, who watched Mary Lou like a hawk watches a mouse. This is good, Ellie announced, beans on her chin. Better than Papa's cooking. Ellie, Ethan said, but there was affection in his exasperation. It's just warming up what was already made, Mary Lou said. But she felt a tiny spark of warmth at the child's approval. After supper, she insisted on cleaning up, despite Ethan's protests. The girls hovered nearby, not quite ready to trust, but not willing to leave either. Bath time, Ethan finally announced, and both girls groaned. I can help, Mary Lou offered tentatively. No, Maggie said quickly. Papa does it. Of course, Mary Lou said, stepping back. I'll just finish up here. Ethan gave her a grateful look before herding the girls upstairs. Mary Lou could hear splashing and giggling, and something in her chest tightened. This was what she'd thought she'd have once, before everything went wrong. A home, children, a man who looked at her with respect instead of hunger or disgust. But this wasn't hers. She was just the hired help, and she'd do well to remember that. By the time Ethan came back downstairs, the girls presumably in bed. Mary Lou had the kitchen spotless and was sitting at the table, hands folded in her lap. You didn't have to do all that, he said. I wanted to earn my supper. He studied her for a moment, then pulled out a chair and sat across from her. I should tell you what I expect, what the job entails. I'd appreciate that. Cooking, cleaning, laundry, help with the girls, getting them dressed, keeping them occupied, teaching them their letters when I'm out working. I run about 50 head of cattle, so there's times I'm gone dawn to dusk. Girls know to mind, but they're still young, still grieving. I understand, Mary Lou said softly. Wages are $15 a month, plus room and board, Sundays off, though you're welcome to take meals with us. Town's about an hour ride if you need supplies or... He paused. Or if you want to attend church. Mary Lou almost laughed. Church. As if any church would welcome her once the gossip started. That's generous, she said instead. It's fair, Ethan corrected. And Miss Barrett, I meant what I said earlier. This is honest work, nothing more. You have my word on that. I believe you, she said, and was surprised to find she meant it. He stood, suddenly looking exhausted. Storm should blow out by morning. I'll get the bunkhouse set up for you tomorrow. For tonight, that room off the kitchen should do. There's blankets in the chest." "Mr. Callahan," she called as he turned to go. "Thank you for taking a chance." He paused in the doorway, not turning around. "We all need second chances. Miss Barrett, get some rest." After he'd gone upstairs, Mary Lou sat in the quiet kitchen, listening to the storm rage outside. For the first time in months, she had a roof over her head that might last more than a night. Food in her belly, a purpose, even if it was just cooking and cleaning. She found the small room Ethan had mentioned, barely bigger than a closet, but it had a narrow cot and, true to his word, blankets in an old chest. As she made up the bed, she heard small footsteps overhead, heard Ethan's low voice soothing one of the girls. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges. The girls would test her. She knew. The town would talk. And living in such close proximity to Ethan Callahan would stir up feelings she'd sworn to bury forever. But tonight, with the storm howling outside and her stomach full for the first time in days, Mary Lou Barrett allowed herself one moment of hope. Maybe this time would be different. Maybe this time she could build something lasting. She blew out the candle and lay down fully clothed, too tired to change, even if she'd had something to change into. Through the thin walls, she could hear Ethan moving around upstairs, the creak of floorboards as he checked on his daughters one more time. A good man, she thought drowsily. Or at least he seemed to be. She'd learned the hard way that seeming and being were often two different things. But for now, she'd take what she could get. The wind rattled the windows, and somewhere in the house, a child cried out in her sleep. Mary Lou heard Ethan's footsteps, heard his voice gentle in the darkness. "Just a dream, Magpie. Papa's here." Papa's here, Mary Lou thought. But who would soothe her nightmares? Who would tell her it was just a dream when the past came calling? As it always did. No one, as always. But at least now she had walls to keep the storm at bay. She pulled the blanket higher and closed her eyes, letting exhaustion finally claim her. Tomorrow she would begin again. Tomorrow she would try to prove herself worthy of this chance. But tonight, for just tonight, she would rest. The rooster's crow pierced through Mary Lou's dreams, pulling her from the deepest sleep she'd had in months. For a moment, she forgot where she was. The narrow cot, the smell of wood smoke and coffee, the absence of wind rattling loose boards. Then memory flooded back. The Callahan Ranch, her new position, her new chance. She dressed quickly in yesterday's clothes, her only clothes, and splashed water on her face from the basin. Through the small window, she could see the sun just beginning to paint the horizon pink and gold. The storm had passed, leaving the air clean and sharp. In the kitchen, she found Ethan already up, nursing a cup of coffee and staring out at his land. He looked up when she entered, something like surprise crossing his features. "I didn't expect you up so early," he said. "I'm used to early mornings," Mary Lou replied, moving to the stove. "Should I start breakfast?" "I usually just have coffee and biscuits. The girls, He paused, rubbing the back of his neck. "They like porridge, when we have it, but they'll eat most anything." Mary Lou opened the pantry, taking stock, flour, lard, some preserved peaches, dried beans, a precious small sack of oats. Not much, but she'd worked with less. "I can make porridge for the girls and biscuits for everyone. Maybe use some of those peaches to sweeten it up." "That'd be..." Ethan stopped, cleared his throat. "That'd be nice. Martha used to do that. Add fruit to the porridge." The name hung in the air between them. Martha, the woman whose place Mary Lou could never fill, whose ghost lived in every corner of this house. "I'll try to do it justice," Mary Lou said quietly. She worked in comfortable silence, muscle memory taking over, kneading dough, stirring porridge, the familiar rhythms of a kitchen coming alive. Ethan remained at the table, ostensibly reading a week-old newspaper, but really watching her work. "Bunkhouse should be ready by afternoon," he said eventually. Just needs cleaning out. Haven't used it since my last hand left. Must be 2 years ago now. I can clean it myself, Mary Lou offered. No need to take you from your work. Might be some heavy lifting, old furniture and such. I'm stronger than I look. He studied her for a moment, taking in her thin frame, her work-worn hands. I believe you are, he said finally. The sound of feet on stairs announced the girl's arrival. Ellie bounded into the kitchen, hair wild from sleep, while Maggie followed more slowly, already wary. Something smells good, Ellie announced, climbing into her chair. Miss Barrett's made porridge. Ethan said, with peaches. Mama's porridge, Maggie asked sharply. My own version, Mary Lou said carefully, setting bowls in front of them. But I hope you'll like it. Maggie took a suspicious bite, then another. She didn't comment, but she cleaned her bowl, which Mary Lou took as a good sign. Ellie chattered through breakfast, telling Mary Lou about her doll named Susie and the barn cat that had kittens last month. Can we see the kittens today, Papa? Ellie asked. After chores, Ethan promised. And after you both help Miss Barrett get settled? I don't need, Mary Lou started. The girls should learn to help. Ethan interrupted gently. It's good for them. After breakfast, while Ethan headed out to tend the cattle, Mary Lou faced her first real test getting 2 young girls dressed and presentable. Ellie was eager but incapable of sitting still. Maggie was capable but unwilling. I can dress myself, Maggie insisted, arms crossed. I'm sure you can. Mary Lou agreed. But your buttons are crooked. May I? Maggie stood stiff as a board while Mary Lou fixed her buttons, then darted away the moment she was done. It was like trying to tame wild horses, Mary Lou thought. But she'd gentled skittish animals before. Patience was key. Now, she said when both girls were dressed, your papa said you could show me the bunkhouse. The building was small and dusty, but structurally sound. A single room with a bed frame, no mattress, a small table, a chair with 3 legs, and enough spider webs to knit a blanket. Nobody's lived here since Tom left, Maggie informed her. He was nice. He taught me to whistle. Can you still whistle? Maggie demonstrated, producing a clear, high note that made Ellie clap. That's wonderful, Mary Lou said, meaning it. Now, shall we make this place livable? They worked through the morning. Or, rather, Mary Lou worked while the girls alternately helped and hindered. Ellie's version of sweeping involved spreading dust around in new patterns. Maggie was more helpful but kept up a running commentary on how things used to be done when Mama was here. Mary Lou let her talk. She understood the need to keep someone's memory alive through words. By noon, they'd cleared out the worst of the dust and debris. Ethan appeared with a mattress from the main house. Spare room won't miss it, and helped her set up the bed. His hands brushed hers as they worked, and Mary Lou felt heat rise in her cheeks. It had been so long since she'd been near a man without fear that these small, accidental touches felt like brands. Papa, I'm hungry, Ellie announced. Then I guess we'd better feed you, Mary Lou said, grateful for the distraction. What do you say to some beans and cornbread? The afternoon fell into a rhythm. Lunch, then washing up. Then Ethan back to work, while Mary Lou tackled the mountain of laundry that had accumulated. The girls played nearby, their voices carrying on the wind. Not quite including her, but not excluding her either. Miss Barrett. Maggie appeared at her elbow as Mary Lou hung sheets on the line. Can you read? Yes, Mary Lou said, surprised by the question. Mama used to read to us every night. Papa tries, but... Maggie scuffed her foot in the dirt. He's not very good at the voices. I see. Mary Lou secured the last corner of the sheet. What kind of stories do you like? Adventure ones, with brave people doing brave things. No princesses, Ellie added, appearing from behind her sister. Princesses are boring. Well then, Mary Lou said, hiding a smile. No princesses. Do you have books? They did, a small collection that had clearly been well loved. That evening, after supper, Mary Lou found herself in the front room with two girls pressed against her sides as she read about Daniel Boone and his wilderness adventures. She did her best with voices, making Daniel gruff and brave, the Native Americans wise and mysterious, the bears properly fearsome. Ethan sat across from them, pretending to work on fixing a broken bridle but really watching the three of them. His expression was unreadable in the lamplight. One more chapter, Ellie begged when Mary Lou paused. Tomorrow, Mary Lou promised. It's bedtime for young adventurers. The bedtime routine was still Ethan's domain. Mary Lou could hear him upstairs, patient with their delays, firm about actual sleep. She used the time to tidy the kitchen and prepare things for morning. They haven't let anyone read to them since Martha, Ethan said when he came back down. Thank you for that. They're sweet girls, Mary Lou said, just missing their mother. Aren't we all? Ethan murmured, then seemed to catch himself. I mean, it's been hard. On all of us. How long? Mary Lou asked gently. 10 months. Lung fever. Started as just a cough. And then... He shook his head. Doctor said there was nothing to be done. She held on till just after Christmas. Long enough to see the girls one last holiday. I'm sorry. So am I. He was quiet for a moment. She would have liked you. I think Martha always said I was too quick to judge folks by what others said about them. Mary Lou felt her chest tighten. Mr. Callahan. Whatever brought you here, whatever people say, that's your business, he interrupted. All I care about is how you treat my girls. And today they smiled. Really smiled. Not just being polite. That's worth more than all the gossip in Wyoming. She couldn't speak past the lump in her throat, so she just nodded. Best get some rest, he said, standing. Days start early around here. Mary Lou made her way to the bunkhouse. Now clean if sparse. The bed was narrow, but had fresh sheets. The single window looked out toward the mountains. It was hers, at least for now. But sleep didn't come easy. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Ethan's face when he talked about his wife, saw the way the girls had slowly warmed to her throughout the day, saw a future that could never be hers, no matter how much she might want it. Because tomorrow or the next day or next week, someone would come to town who knew her story, who knew about Kansas and Silas Whitlow and the choices she'd been forced to make. And then Ethan's kindness would turn to disgust. The girls would be pulled away from her, and she'd be back on the road with nowhere to go. She'd seen it happen too many times to hope for different. A soft knock on the door made her sit up. Miss Barrett. It was Maggie's voice, small and uncertain. Mary Lou opened the door to find the girl standing in her nightgown, shivering in the cool night air. What's wrong, sweetheart? I had a bad dream about Mama. Sometimes I can't remember her face right, and it scares me. Without thinking, Mary Lou pulled the girl into her arms. Maggie stiffened for a moment, then melted against her, tears coming fast and hot. It's all right, Mary Lou whispered, stroking her hair. It's all right to be scared, but you know what, your Mama's face lives in you. I can see her in your eyes, in the way you care for your sister. She's not gone as long as you remember the love. Papa says that too, Maggie sniffled. But sometimes I just want her here. I know. Oh, sweetheart, I know. They stood there in the doorway for long minutes, until Maggie's tears slowed. Finally, the girl pulled back, wiping her face. Will you walk me back to the house? Of course. They made their way across the yard, hand in hand, at the house. Ethan met them at the door, worry creasing his face. Bad dream, Mary Lou explained quietly. He gathered Maggie into his arms, and over her head. His eyes met Mary Lou's. Something passed between them, gratitude, understanding, and something deeper that neither was ready to name. "Thank you," he mouthed. Mary Lou nodded and turned to go, but Maggie's voice stopped her. "Miss Barrett, will you be here tomorrow?" "Yes," Mary Lou promised. "I'll be here tomorrow." As she walked back to the bunkhouse, she thought about promises and how dangerous they were. She'd promised to be here tomorrow, but life had taught her that tomorrow was never guaranteed. Still, looking back at the warm light spilling from the Callahan house, hearing Ethan's low voice soothing his daughter, Mary Lou let herself believe. Just for tonight. She'd believe that tomorrow would come and she'd still be welcome here. The stars were bright overhead, the air crisp and clean. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote called to its pack. Mary Lou wrapped her shawl tighter and quickened her pace. Tomorrow there would be breakfast to make, clothes to mend, stories to read, small things, ordinary things, but things that mattered. For the first time in so long, she had something to wake up for besides mere survival. It terrified her almost as much as it gave her hope. But hope, like promises, was a dangerous thing for a woman like her. Better to focus on the work, on the girls, on making herself useful enough that when the truth came out. And it always did. Maybe, just maybe, it wouldn't matter. She reached the bunkhouse and paused, looking back one more time. A figure stood at an upstairs window. Ethan, keeping watch, making sure she made it safely to her door. Such a small kindness, but it nearly undid her. Inside, she readied herself for bed properly this time, hanging her dress carefully, washing in the basin, letting down her hair. Tomorrow she'd ask about getting some fabric to make another dress, something respectable, appropriate for her position. Her position, housekeeper, caretaker, the woman who cooked and cleaned and soothed bad dreams but could never be more. It was enough, she told herself firmly. It had to be enough. But as she lay down and closed her eyes, she couldn't help but remember the weight of Maggie in her arms, the trust in Ellie's eyes as she listened to the story, the way Ethan had said thank you like he meant so much more. Dangerous thoughts, dangerous dreams. Tomorrow, she promised herself. Tomorrow she'd remember her place. Tomorrow she'd build better walls around her heart. But tonight, just for tonight, she'd let herself imagine what it would be like to truly belong here, to be more than the hired help, to be family. The coyote called again, closer now, and Mary Lou pulled the covers higher. Outside, the vast Wyoming night stretched endless and dark. But here, in this small room on this small ranch, she was safe. For now, that was miracle enough. The garden had been dead for nearly a year. Mary Lou discovered it 3 weeks into her stay at the Callahan Ranch, hidden behind the chicken coop like a guilty secret. Dried stalks of what might have been tomatoes stood like skeletons against broken fence posts. Weeds had claimed most of the ground, but she could still see the raised beds, the careful rows that someone, Martha, had once tended with love. "Mama's garden," Ellie said, appearing at Mary Lou's elbow. The child had a gift for silent approach that constantly startled her. "Papa told us not to go back here anymore." "Why's that?" Mary Lou asked, kneeling to examine the soil. "Still good earth underneath the neglect." "Makes him sad." Ellie picked up a dried bean pod, rattling the seeds inside. "Everything about Mama makes him sad." Mary Lou understood that particular weight of sadness. How memories could hurt worse than wounds. "What did she grow here?" "Everything." Ellie's face lit up. "Tomatoes and beans and squash. Flowers, too. She said gardens needed pretty things as much as useful ones." Smart woman. Mary Lou stood, brushing dirt from her hands. An idea was forming, dangerous in its hope. "Ellie, do you think... would your papa mind if I tried to fix it up?" Ellie scrunched her nose, thinking, "Don't know. Maggie might get mad. She gets mad about Mama things." As if summoned by her name, Maggie appeared around the corner. Her eyes narrowed when she saw where they were. "You're not supposed to be here." "I'm sorry," Mary Lou said. "I was just exploring and—" This was Mama's place. Maggie's small hands clenched into fists. "Nobody else is allowed to touch it." "I understand." Mary Lou kept her voice gentle. "Would you tell me about it, what it was like when she worked here?" Maggie's fierce expression wavered. "Why?" "Because gardens hold memories, and memories are precious things that should be shared, not left to dry up and blow away." For a long moment, Maggie studied her. Then, slowly, she stepped into the abandoned garden. "She had marigolds there," she said, pointing. "Said they kept the bugs away. And that's where the carrots grew. I helped to plant them last spring." "But they never came up," Ellie added sadly. "'Cause Mama got sick?" Mary Lou listened as the girls walked her through their mother's domain, painting pictures with words of green growing things and Martha's laughter and the way she'd sing while she weeded. By the end, all three of them had dirt on their hands from clearing small patches, as if the earth itself was calling them to begin again. That evening, Mary Lou approached Ethan after the girls were in bed. He was sitting on the porch, watching the sun paint the mountains red. "I found the garden today," she said without preamble. His shoulders tensed. "I've been meaning to clear it out, just haven't had the heart." What if instead of clearing it out, we brought it back?" He turned to look at her then, his expression unreadable. "Why would you want to do that?" "Because the girls need to see that beautiful things can grow again after loss. Because fresh vegetables would help stretch the food budget. Because—" She took a breath. "Because I understand what it's like to need to build something new from ruins." Ethan was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, "Martha loved that garden, spent every free moment there, said it was her sanctuary. I'm not trying to replace—" "I know," his voice was rough. "I know you're not. Maybe that's why it might be all right. To let it grow again, but different. The girls could help. It would be good for them. Working the earth." "Martha always said that too." A ghost of a smile crossed his face. "All right, Miss Barrett, you can resurrect the garden. Just be patient with us if it's hard sometimes." "I understand hard," she said simply. The next morning, Mary Lou woke with purpose thrumming through her veins. After breakfast and chores, she gathered the girls and a collection of old tools from the barn. "First thing," she announced, "we need to clear the weeds and see what we're working with." Maggie hung back at first, but Ellie dove in with enthusiasm, pulling weeds with more energy than skill. Slowly, Maggie joined them, working beside Mary Lou in careful silence. They found treasures in the ruins, a trowel with MC carved in the handle, seed packets tucked in a tin box, still viable despite the months of neglect. Maggie held her mother's trowel like it was made of gold. "You should use it," Mary Lou said gently. "Tools are meant to work, not sit idle." By noon, they'd cleared one full bed. Ethan appeared with water and surveyed their progress. "Looks different already," he said, and if his voice caught slightly, no one mentioned it. "Papa, look," Ellie held up a particularly large weed root. "I got a monster." "That's my fierce girl," he said, ruffling her hair. Then, to Mary Lou, "There's a seed store in town. If you make a list, I'll pick up what you need next time I go." "We found some seeds," Maggie said, showing him the tin. "Mama's seeds." Ethan's face did something complicated. "Well then, guess you'd better plant those first." That afternoon, while the girls napped, Mary Lou worked alone in the garden. The repetitive motion of clearing and turning soil let her mind wander. She thought about Martha, this woman she'd never met but whose ghost shaped every day. What would she think of another woman tending her sanctuary? Would she approve? A shadow fell across the ground. Mary Lou looked up to find Ethan watching her. "You don't have to work so hard," he said. "This isn't part of what I hired you for." "I know." She sat back on her heels, pushing hair from her face. "But it feels good, building something. I haven't had the chance to do that in a long time." He crouched beside her, picking up a handful of soil and letting it sift through his fingers. Good earth. Martha always said it was some of the best she'd worked. Where was she from originally? Ohio, farm girl through and through. Came west with her family when she was 16. I met her at a barn raising. She was trying to lift a beam by herself, too stubborn to ask for help. His smile held equal parts fondness and pain. Took me 3 months to convince her to marry me. Said she had to be sure I wouldn't try to tame her wild ways. Sounds like a strong woman. The strongest until she wasn't. He stood abruptly. I should get back to work. But he paused at the garden gate. Mary Lou? It was the first time he'd used her given name. Yes. Thank you for giving it life again. That evening brought an unexpected trial. Mary Lou was serving supper when hoofbeats announced a visitor. Ethan frowned. They rarely had callers, especially at mealtimes. The knock was authoritative. Ethan opened the door to reveal a woman in her 50s, sharp-eyed and stern-mouthed. Mrs. Harriet Powell, Mary Lou would learn, the self-appointed moral guardian of the county. "Ethan," she said, her gaze sliding past him to land on Mary Lou. "I heard you'd taken on help." "Evening, Harriet. Would you like to come in?" "I would." She swept past him, her dress rustling with disapproval. "Girls, run along upstairs." "But we're eating," Ellie protested. "Go on," Ethan said quietly. Maggie grabbed her sister's hand and they disappeared, though Mary Lou suspected they weren't going far. "I'll be direct." "Mrs. Powell said, not bothering to sit. "There are concerns in town about your arrangement." "What arrangement would that be?" Ethan's voice was dangerously quiet. "An unmarried woman? Living on your property? Caring for your children? Surely you can see how inappropriate it appears." Mary Lou felt heat rise in her cheeks, but kept silent. She'd learned that defending herself only made things worse. "Miss Barrett is my employee," Ethan said. "She lives in the bunkhouse, not the main house. Everything is entirely proper." "Is it, Mrs.?" Powell's gaze raked over Mary Lou. "And what do we know of Miss Barrett's background, where she comes from, why a young woman is drifting alone through the territories?" "We know," Ethan said, stepping slightly in front of Mary Lou, "that she works hard, treats my daughters with kindness, and minds her own business, which is more than I can say for some." "Mrs." Powell's face pinched tighter. "I'm only thinking of those poor motherless girls. They need proper influence, not some drifter of questionable morals." "Get out." Ethan's voice was soft but implacable. "Get out of my house." "Ethan Callahan, you mark my words." "I said get out." "Mrs." Powell left in a flutter of indignation, but the damage was done. Mary Lou stood frozen, waiting for the axe to fall. This was how it always started: whispers, visits, pressure until she was forced to leave. "I should go," she said quietly. "I don't want to cause trouble for you or the girls." "You'll do no such thing." Ethan turned to her, eyes blazing. "Harriet Powell has been a busybody since before Martha and I married. She disapproved of Martha too, said she was too forward, too unconventional. But if people are talking, let them talk." He ran a hand through his hair. "Do you want to leave?" The question caught her off guard. No." "Then stay. The girls need you. He stopped. "The ranch needs you. Don't let Harriet Powell chase you off." Later, after the dishes were done and the girls were settled with a story, Mary Lou escaped to the garden. The moon was rising, casting silver light over the cleared earth. She knelt and pressed her hands into the soil, grounding herself. It's pretty at night. She turned to find Maggie in her nightgown, bare feet in the dirt. "You should be in bed, sweetheart." "I heard Mrs. Powell." Maggie's chin lifted. "She's mean. Mama didn't like her either." "Your mama sounds like a wise woman." Maggie came closer, settling beside Mary Lou. "Are you going to leave?" "Do you want me to—" "No!" The word came quick and fierce. You're not Mama, but you're nice, and you're making the garden grow again." Mary Lou felt tears prick her eyes. "Then I'll stay as long as your papa lets me." Promise. Such a dangerous word, but looking at this fierce little girl who'd lost so much, Mary Lou couldn't say anything else. "I promise." Maggie nodded, satisfied. Then, quick as a bird, she hugged Mary Lou and ran back to the house. Mary Lou stayed in the garden a while longer, thinking about promises and gardens and second chances. Her hands were dirty, her back ached, and tomorrow she'd face more suspicious looks in town. But tonight, she'd made a little girl smile. She'd stood up to judgment and hadn't been found wanting. She'd planted the first seeds in earth that had known too much sorrow. It wasn't her garden. Not really. It would always be Martha's first. But maybe, like Ethan had said, it could grow again. Different, but still beautiful. A sound made her look up. Ethan stood at his bedroom window, a silhouette against lamplight, watching over his domain, his daughters. And now, whether he admitted it or not, her too. Mary Lou raised her hand in a small wave. After a moment, he returned it. Tomorrow there would be more seeds to plant, more weeds to pull, more suspicious neighbors to face. But tonight, she had dirt under her nails and hope in her heart. It was enough to start with. Gardens, after all, taught patience. The best things took time to grow. Trust, love, home. She stood, brushing dirt from her skirt, and made her way back to the bunkhouse. Behind her, the cleared earth waited, ready for new life. Above, the stars watched, silent witnesses to this small resurrection. In the main house, a child coughed, and Ethan's low voice carried on the night air, soothing, constant. Mary Lou paused, listening, then continued to her door. She belonged here. She realized. Not fully, not yet, but a little more each day. Like seeds taking root, reaching deep, preparing to bloom. The stranger arrived on a Tuesday morning, riding a bay mare with fancy tack that spoke of money. Mary Lou was hanging laundry when she spotted him coming up the road, and something in her chest went cold before she even saw his face clearly. She knew that way of sitting a horse, proud, entitled, like the world owed him passage. Her hands stilled on the wet sheet, and for a moment she considered running. But where would she go? And the girls were in the garden, working on their rows of beans. "Miss Mary Lou," Ellie called out. "The scarecrow's falling over again." "I'll be right there," she managed, but her voice came out strange. The rider drew closer, and Mary Lou's worst fears crystallized. Silas Whitlow. His golden hair was longer now, his clothes finer, but she'd never forget that face, the face that had promised her marriage and respectability before revealing his true nature. He dismounted at the gate, taking his time, making a show of it. Well, Mary Lou Barrett. Took me some time to track you down." "Mr. Whitlow." She forced herself to stand straight, though her knees felt like water. "What do you want? Is that any way to greet an old friend?" His smile was the same, all teeth and no warmth. "Though I suppose friend isn't quite right. Is it not after you ran off in the night like a thief? I took nothing that wasn't mine. Didn't you?" He stepped closer, and she could smell his cologne, too strong for the morning air. "Seems to me you took quite a bit. My time, my investment in your education, my reputation when you disappeared." "Miss Mary Lou." Maggie appeared at her elbow, eyes wary. "Who's this?" "Nobody important," Mary Lou said quickly. Go back to your sister. But Maggie, stubborn as always, didn't move. Papa said we're not supposed to talk to strangers. Silas's eyebrows rose. Papa, you have been busy, haven't you? His gaze traveled over the ranch, calculating. Nice setup, widower. I heard in town. Recent loss. How convenient for you. You need to leave, Mary Lou said, putting her hand on Maggie's shoulder. Oh, I'll leave. But first, we should discuss what you owe me. See, I had to close my establishment in Kansas because of you. All those stories you spread. I told no stories, only the truth. His face darkened. Your version of truth cost me considerable money. I think it's only fair you compensate me, unless... He looked at the house meaningfully. You'd prefer I share some truths of my own with your new employer. What's going on here? Ethan's voice cut through the morning like a blade. He strode from the barn, rifle casual in his hands, though his eyes were anything but casual. Mr. Callahan, Mary Lou said, hating how her voice shook. This is... Silas Whitlow, the man interrupted, extending a hand that Ethan didn't take. Old acquaintance of Miss Barrett's from Kansas. Just passing through and thought I'd look her up. That's so. Ethan's gaze moved between them. Reading the situation? Well, you've looked. Now you can move on. Actually, Miss Barrett and I have some unfinished business. No, Ethan said simply. You don't... Whatever business you think you have, it's finished now. Silas's smile tightened. I don't think you understand. Miss Barrett worked for me in Kansas, in my boarding house. He put special emphasis on the words, making their meaning clear. I'm sure you'd be interested to know exactly what kind of work she did. Mary Lou closed her eyes, waiting for the blow to fall. This was it, the end of her sanctuary, her peace, her growing hope. I know exactly what kind of man runs those kinds of establishments, Ethan said, his voice deadly quiet. And I know what kind of man comes sniffing around trying to drag women back to them. So I'll say this once. Get off my land. You don't know who you're protecting, Silas snarled, dropping all pretense of civility. She's nothing but a... The rifle shifted, just slightly. Choose your next words real careful, Ethan warned. Papa. Ellie had joined them now, both girls pressed against Mary Lou's skirts. Girls, go inside, Ethan ordered. But now... They went, but not far. Mary Lou could see them peering through the kitchen window. This isn't over, Silas said, but he was already backing toward his horse. She owes me, and I always collect my debts. Try it, Ethan said. See how far you get. Silas mounted his horse with less grace than he dismounted. You'll regret this, Callahan, when you learn what she really is. I know what she is, Ethan interrupted. She's under my protection. That's all that matters. They watched him ride away, dust rising in his wake. Mary Lou's legs finally gave out and she sank onto the porch steps, shaking. I'm sorry, she whispered. I'm so sorry. I'll pack my things. You'll do no such thing. Ethan set the rifle aside and crouched in front of her. Look at me. She couldn't bear to see the questions in his eyes, the doubt that must be there now. Mary Lou, look at me. Slowly, she raised her head. His face was serious but not angry, not disgusted. I don't care what happened in Kansas, he said firmly. I don't care what that man says you did or didn't do. You're here now, and you've been nothing but good to my girls in this ranch. That's all that matters to me. But people will talk. They already talk. Let them. He stood, offering her his hand. Come on. Girls are probably worried. She took his hand, let him pull her to her feet. His grip was warm, calloused, steady, safe. When was the last time she'd felt safe with a man? Inside. The girls peppered her with questions. Who was that man? Why was he mean? Was she in trouble? Just someone I used to know. Mary Lou said, trying to smile. Sometimes people from our past show up when we don't want them to. Like ghosts? Ellie asked. Something like that. But Papa scared him away, Maggie said with satisfaction. Papa protects us. Yes, Mary Lou agreed softly. He does. The rest of the day passed in a blur. Mary Lou went through the motions, cooking, cleaning, working the garden, but her mind kept circling back to Silas's threats. He wouldn't give up easily. He never did when he thought someone owed him. That evening, after the girls were in bed, she found Ethan on the porch again, watching the road. Expecting him back, she asked. Maybe. Men like that don't like being told no. He glanced at her. You want to tell me about it? No, she said honestly. But I think I should. You deserve to know what you're protecting. I told you. I don't. Please. She sat beside him, careful to leave space between them. Let me say this. I need to. He nodded, waiting. I was 19 when I met him, she began, staring at her hands. My parents had died of fever, and I had nothing, no family, no money, no prospects. Silas seemed like salvation. He was handsome, charming, said all the right things, promised to marry me, set me up in my own household. She paused, gathering courage. Instead, he took me to Kansas, to his establishment, said I owed him for travel expenses, for room and board, said I had to work it off before we could marry, but the debt never got smaller, no matter how much I worked. Ethan's hands clenched on his knees, but he didn't interrupt. I tried to leave several times. He always found me, brought me back, said no decent man would want me now anyway. So where would I go? She laughed bitterly. He was right about that part. Every town I've been to since, someone eventually finds out. And then idiots like Harriet Powell show up making judgments about things they don't understand. Ethan finished. She stopped, started again. I kept myself as much as I could, found ways to avoid the worst of it. That's why he called me worthless. I wasn't profitable enough, but I wouldn't become what he wanted me to be. How did you get away? There was a fire. Not a big one, but enough chaos that I could slip out. I took nothing, just ran. I've been running ever since. 2 years now. She finally looked at him. So now you know. I understand if you want me to leave. I'll go quietly. Just let me say goodbye to the girls. Mary Lou. His voice was rough. Do you really think I'd send you away for surviving, for escaping a bad situation? Most people would. I'm not most people. He turned to face her fully. My Martha. She had her own past. Came from a family where her father drank and got mean. She ran, too, at 16. Folks whispered about her, said she was wild, untamed. Know what I saw? A survivor. A woman who'd do whatever it took to build a better life. Mary Lou felt tears threaten. She was lucky to find you. I was lucky to find her. And He stopped, cleared his throat. The girls are lucky to have you. This ranch is better with you here. Don't let Silas Whitlow or anyone else chase you off. What if he comes back? Then I'll deal with him. There was steel in his voice. This is my land, my family. I protect what's mine. The word hung between them, mine, not quite claiming her, but including her in his sphere of protection. It was more than she dared hope for. Thank you, she whispered. No need for thanks, just keep doing what you're doing. Being here, being you. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars emerge, inside. One of the girls coughed, and they both tensed, listening. But it was just a single cough, not the harsh barking that signaled real illness. I should go, Mary Lou said eventually. Early morning. Always is. But Ethan made no move to leave either. Finally, she stood, and he did too. For a moment they were close, close enough that she could see the gold flecks in his brown eyes, smell the leather and soap scent of him. "Good night, Ethan," she said softly. "Good night, Mary Lou." She was halfway to the bunkhouse when he called after her. "Mary Lou, that garden's coming along real nice. Martha would be pleased." She smiled in the darkness. "I hope so." In her small room, she sat on the bed and let the shakes finally take her. Silas had found her. Her past had caught up, as she'd always known it would. But instead of casting her out, Ethan had stood as her shield, had claimed her as worthy of protection. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. Silas might return, might spread his poison in town. Mrs. Powell would certainly have opinions about today's events. The comfortable anonymity she'd built was shattered. But tonight, she was still here, still had a bed to sleep in, work to do tomorrow, 2 girls who needed her, and a man who looked at her and saw not shame but strength. She prepared for bed slowly, hanging her dress carefully, brushing her hair. Through the window, she could see a light still burning in the main house. Ethan keeping watch, protecting what was his. Not quite his, she reminded herself. She was the hired help, nothing more. But for the first time in 2 years, she felt like she might be able to stop running, might be able to plant roots as deep as the vegetables in Martha's garden. Mary Lou blew out her candle and lay down, pulling the quilt up to her chin. Outside, an owl called, and its mate answered. The sound was lonely and comforting at once. She closed her eyes and tried not to think about Ethan's hands, steady on that rifle, his voice saying, "I protect what's mine." The way he'd looked at her, not with pity or judgment, but with understanding. Dangerous thoughts, but after today, she was too tired to fight them. Tomorrow she'd rebuild her walls, remember her place. Tonight, she'd let herself feel protected, safe, for however long it lasted. The smell of smoke woke Mary Lou from restless dreams. At first, she thought it was the kitchen stove, perhaps left smoldering from evening's meal. But as consciousness sharpened, she realized the scent was wrong. Not wood smoke, but something acrid. Chemical, hay, old timber, fear. She threw off her quilt and ran to the window. Orange light flickered against the barn walls, and her heart stopped. Fire! The barn was on fire. Ethan. She didn't bother with shoes or shawl, just ran across the yard in her nightgown. Fire the barn. But he was already emerging from the house, pulling on boots, his face grim in the hellish light. "Get the girls to safety," he shouted, rushing toward the barn. "Keep them at the house." Mary Lou ran to the kitchen door to find both girls already there, Ellie crying and Maggie white-faced with terror. "The horses," Maggie said. "Papa's horses are in there." "Your papa will get them," Mary Lou said, though she could see the flames were already licking up the sides of the structure. "Come on, we need to get water, all the buckets we can find." It was hopeless. She knew it even as they formed a bucket brigade. The barn was old, dry as tinder after the summer heat, but they had to try. Ethan had managed to get 2 of the horses out, but his prize mare, Martha's horse, was still trapped in the far stall, screaming in terror. "Stay back," Ethan ordered as Mary Lou approached with another bucket. His face was black with soot, his shirt singed. "Sundancer's still in there," Maggie sobbed. "Mama's horse." Mary Lou looked at the barn, at Ethan preparing to go back in despite the flames now reaching the roof, at the girls clinging to each other. Martha's horse, the last living thing the dead woman had loved. Without thinking, she dropped her bucket and ran. "Mary Lou, no." She heard Ethan's roar behind her, but didn't stop. The smoke hit her like a wall, thick and choking. She dropped to her knees, crawling beneath the worst of it, feeling her way along the stalls. The heat was incredible, like being inside an oven. There, the mare's terrified whinnying. The stall door was jammed, warped from the heat. Mary Lou grabbed a fallen board and used it as a lever, putting all her weight behind it. The door gave way with a crack. Sundancer reared, eyes rolling white with terror. Mary Lou grabbed the halter, pulling with strength she didn't know she possessed. "Come on, girl, come on." The roof beam above them groaned ominously. Sparks rained down like deadly snow. Mary Lou's hands were screaming with pain, but she held on, dragging the terrified horse toward where she hoped the door was. Then strong hands were there, taking the halter from her. Ethan! Together they stumbled from the inferno, Sundancer breaking free once outside and galloping to safety. Mary Lou fell to her knees in the dirt, coughing, retching. Her hands. She looked down and saw angry blisters already forming across her palms. "You fool woman," Ethan said, dropping beside her. His voice was rough with smoke and something else. "You beautiful, brave, foolish woman." She looked up at him through streaming eyes and saw tears cutting tracks through the soot on his face. "Martha's horse," she whispered. "Couldn't let the girls." "I know." He cradled her burned hands in his, gentle as if she were made of glass. "I know." The barn collapsed behind them with a roar, sending up a column of sparks into the night sky. All that work, all that hay and feed, gone in minutes. But the horses were safe. The house was safe. They were safe. "Papa!" The girls ran to them, and Ethan gathered them close with one arm, keeping the other around Mary Lou. "It's all right," he said, though nothing was all right. "We're all safe. That's what matters." "Miss Mary Lou saved Sundancer," Maggie said through her tears. "She saved Mama's horse." "Yes," Ethan said quietly. "She did." Neighbors began arriving, drawn by the glow against the sky. Men with shovels and wet blankets, making sure the fire didn't spread. Women with water and sympathy. Even Mrs. Powell came, though her lips were pursed with disapproval at finding Mary Lou in her nightgown, held in Ethan's embrace. "Let's get those hands tended," said Mrs. Morrison, the doctor's wife, kind and practical. "Come now, dear, this way." But when she tried to stand, Mary Lou's legs wouldn't hold her. The pain was catching up now, radiating from her hands up her arms. She'd seen burns before, knew these would scar. Ethan scooped her up as if she weighed nothing. "Kitchen," he said to Mrs. Morrison. "Girls, go with Mrs. Johnson." "But Papa." "Go on, I'll take care of Miss Mary Lou." The kitchen was blessedly cool after the heat of the fire. Ethan set her gently in a chair while Mrs. Morrison prepared a basin of cool water and gathered supplies. "This will hurt," the older woman warned. It did. Mary Lou bit her lip until it bled, trying not to cry out as her hands were cleaned and treated. Through it all, Ethan stayed close, his presence an anchor against the pain. "You're lucky," Mrs. Morrison said, as she wrapped bandages around Mary Lou's palms. "These could have been much worse, but you'll need to keep them clean and dry. No work for at least 2 weeks. 2 weeks, Mary Lou protested. "But the girls, the house." "We'll manage." Ethan interrupted. "You saved Martha's horse. You think I care about a few weeks of dishes?" Mrs. Morrison packed up her supplies, giving Ethan instructions for continued care. At the door, she paused. "That was a brave thing you did, Miss Barrett. Foolish, but brave. Martha would have been grateful." After she left, silence fell. Outside, they could hear voices as neighbors continued to ensure the fire was truly out. Inside, it was just the two of them in the lamplight. "Why?" Ethan asked finally. "Why risk your life for a horse?" Mary Lou looked at her bandaged hands. "She wasn't just a horse. She was Martha's. The girls have already lost so much. I couldn't let them lose her, too." "You could have died. So could you, but you went in first. They're my responsibility. And they've become mine, too," she said quietly. "Somewhere along the way, they became mine to protect, too." Ethan was quiet for a long moment. Then he knelt beside her chair, taking her bandaged hands with infinite care. "Let me see. Mrs. Morrison already—" "Let me see." She let him unwrap one of the bandages. The burns were ugly, blistered and raw. He made a sound low in his throat, then did something that stopped her heart. He lifted her hand and pressed the gentlest kiss to her wrist, just above the damage. "Ethan," she breathed. He looked up at her, and his eyes were dark with emotion. "When I saw you run into that barn, I thought, God, Mary Lou, I thought I was going to lose you too, and I realized—" He stopped, struggled, started again. "These hands. You use them to make bread, to tend the garden, to hold my girls when they cry. They're working hands, capable hands. But to me—" He traced a finger along her arm, barely touching, raising goosebumps in its wake. "They called you worthless, but when I watch these hands work, it's like watching someone shape heaven out of ordinary things. Flour becomes bread, seeds become food, a house becomes a home. My girls smile again, all because of these hands." Mary Lou couldn't breathe, couldn't think. "Ethan, we can't—" "I know." He wrapped the bandage again, carefully. "I know all the reasons why not. You work for me. It hasn't been a year since Martha. People already talk. I know all of it." He stood, pacing to the window. "But tonight, when I thought I might lose you, none of that mattered. Only this: you've brought life back to this place, to us, to me." "Ethan," she stood on shaky legs, crossing to him. "I can't be her. I can't be Martha." "I don't want you to be." He turned to face her. "I loved my wife. Part of me always will. But you're not meant to fill her place. You're making your own place. In this house, in our lives, in my—" He stopped, jaw tight with the effort of holding back words. "Your girls need stability," Mary Lou said, hating herself for being practical when her heart was racing. "They need to know I won't leave. If this goes badly—" "Then we go slowly," he said, carefully. "But Mary Lou, I need you to know what I feel. It's not gratitude. It's not loneliness. It's not because you're convenient. It's because you're you." A sound at the door made them spring apart. Maggie stood there, soot-streaked and exhausted. "Is Miss Mary Lou okay?" she asked. "I'm fine, sweetheart," Mary Lou said, holding up her bandaged hands. "Just a little scorched." Maggie flew across the room, wrapping her arms around Mary Lou's waist. "You saved her. You saved Mama's horse. You're the bravest person I know." Mary Lou looked over the child's head at Ethan, who was watching them with such tenderness it made her chest ache. "Where's your sister?" he asked. "Fell asleep at Mrs. Johnson's. Can I stay here tonight? I don't want to leave." "Of course," Mary Lou said before Ethan could answer. "Let's get you cleaned up first." It was awkward with her bandaged hands, but between her and Ethan, they managed to get Maggie washed and into a clean nightgown. The child was asleep almost before her head hit the pillow, curled in Mary Lou's bed in the little room off the kitchen. "I should check on the neighbors," Ethan said. "Thank them." "Of course." But he lingered at the door. "Mary Lou, what I said, I meant it, every word, but I won't press. You've been through enough tonight. We'll take this as slow as you need." After he left, Mary Lou sat by sleeping Maggie, watching the child's peaceful face. Through the window, she could see the smoldering remains of the barn, a black scar against the land. Come morning, there would be so much work, salvaging what they could, figuring out how to shelter the animals, dealing with the loss of feed and equipment. But there would also be neighbors helping to rebuild. There would be Ethan's steady presence, the girls' resilience, the garden still growing despite the disaster. There would be healing for her hands, for their hearts, for all the wounds visible and invisible. She thought of Ethan's words, of the way he'd looked at her hands like they were precious instead of scarred, the way he'd said she brought life back to this place. Maybe that's what love was in its truest form. Not the wild promises of youth, but this quiet tending, the daily choice to build something together, to protect what mattered, to find beauty in working hands in ordinary moments. The fire had taken the barn, but revealed something else. The connections they'd built were stronger than she'd realized. Strong enough to run into flames, strong enough to risk scarred hands and scorched hearts. Strong enough, maybe, to last. Maggie stirred, murmuring in her sleep. Mary Lou smoothed her hair with the back of her bandaged hand, humming softly. Outside, voices rose and fell as the community came together in crisis. Tomorrow would bring its challenges, but tonight, she was exactly where she needed to be, watching over a child who trusted her, in a house that had become home, with a man who saw her truly. The burns would heal, the barn would be rebuilt, and maybe, just maybe, 2 wounded hearts could risk hoping again. She heard Ethan's voice outside, tired but strong, organizing the salvage efforts. Her hands throbbed, but her heart felt strangely light. She'd run into fire tonight, for Martha's horse, for the girls, for this life she was building. And in the flames, she'd found something unexpected. Not destruction, but transformation. The woman who'd arrived here weeks ago, running from her past, would never have risked so much. But that woman was gone, burned away like dross, leaving someone stronger in her place. Someone worth choosing, someone worth keeping, someone perhaps worth loving. The thought should have terrified her. Instead, as she listened to Ethan's voice and watched Maggie sleep and felt the pulse of pain in her healing hands, Mary Lou Barrett smiled. The old wooden chest sat in the corner of the attic like a monument to grief. Mary Lou had discovered it while searching for winter blankets. Now that September had brought its first cold snap, she'd almost passed it by, just another dusty relic in a house full of memories. But something about the careful way it had been pushed into the shadows, covered with an old quilt, made her pause. "That's Mama's things," Maggie said from the attic stairs. The girl had an uncanny ability to appear whenever Mary Lou stumbled upon something from the past. Papa put it there after she went to heaven, said it hurt too much to look at. Mary Lou's hands, still bearing faint scars from the fire 6 weeks ago, rested on the chest. Should we leave it be then? Maggie climbed the rest of the way up, her face serious in the dim light filtering through the small window. Papa's been different lately. Happier, maybe. Maybe it wouldn't hurt so much now. Different. Yes, Ethan had been different since the fire. Careful still, respectful of boundaries, but there were moments, a lingering look, a hand that rested on her shoulder a beat too long, conversations on the porch that stretched past propriety. Nothing improper, nothing the gossips could point to, but something growing between them like the autumn vegetables in the garden. "We should ask him first," Mary Lou said. But Maggie was already lifting the quilt, revealing a chest of polished cedar. "Just a peek, I sometimes forget things about her, little things, and it scares me." The raw honesty in the child's voice decided it. Mary Lou opened the chest carefully, as if it might contain something fragile enough to shatter at a touch. The scent hit her first, lavender and rose preserved in sachets tucked among the contents. On top lay a dress, blue calico with tiny yellow flowers, folded with heartbreaking care. Beneath it, more clothes, a silver brush and mirror set, a Bible with pressed flowers between its pages, and letters, dozens of letters tied with ribbon. Maggie reached for the brush, running her small fingers over the engraved initials. M.E. Martha Elizabeth Callahan. She used to brush my hair every night, 100 strokes, said it would make it shine like moonlight. She was right, Mary Lou said softly, touching Maggie's dark hair. It does shine. They spent an hour going through the chest, Maggie sharing memories with each item. The shawl Martha wore to church, the apron she'd embroidered during her pregnancy with Ellie, a pair of tiny knitted booties that had belonged to each girl in turn. Mary Lou was reaching for the letters when Maggie suddenly grabbed her hand.
Maybe we shouldn't.
But the ribbon had already come loose, and several letters spilled across the attic floor. Mary Lou gathered them quickly, trying not to look, but her eyes caught words that made her freeze. The melancholy has taken hold again. Cannot seem to find joy in anything. Ethan tries so hard, but he doesn't understand this darkness that swallows me whole.
What's wrong?
Maggie asked, sensing the change. Nothing. Sweetheart, these are private. We should—
Melancholy,
Maggie said quietly.
That's what Doc Morrison called it, Mama's sadness. She got it after Ellie was born. Some days she couldn't even get out of bed.
Mary Lou carefully retied the letters, her mind spinning. She'd known Martha had died of lung fever, but this painted a different picture, a woman struggling with something deeper than physical illness.
Papa blamed himself,
Maggie continued, wise beyond her 7 years.
Said he should have seen it sooner, should have helped more, but Mama was good at pretending. She'd smile and laugh when people visited, then cry for hours after they left. Oh, sweetheart.
Mary Lou pulled the girl close.
None of that was anyone's fault. Sometimes people get sick in ways we can't see. Is that why she died? Because she was too sad?
No, Mary Lou said firmly.
She died because her lungs got sick. The sadness might have made it harder to fight, but it wasn't the cause, and she fought hard. You said she held on through Christmas. That's love. Maggie, fighting through sadness and sickness to be with the people you love.
Maggie leaned against her, and they sat in the dusty quiet of the attic, surrounded by the pieces of a life cut short. Mary Lou, Maggie, you up there. Ethan's voice from below made them both jump.
We're here, Papa,
Maggie called.
We found Mama's chest.
Heavy footsteps on the stairs. Then Ethan appeared, taking in the scene, the open chest, the scattered belongings, his daughter wrapped in Mary Lou's arms. Mary Lou braced for anger, but his face showed only a deep weariness. I wondered when someone would find it, kept meaning to go through it, but—
I'm sorry,
Mary Lou began.
We should have asked.
No. He climbed the rest of the way up, settling his large frame onto the dusty floor beside them. It's time. Past time. Probably. He picked up the blue dress, holding it gently. She wore this to the barn raising where we met. I told her she looked like a summer sky. She laughed and said I was full of romantic nonsense. Tell us more, Maggie urged. Good stories, happy ones. So he did. For the next hour, Ethan shared memories Mary Lou had never heard. Martha learning to ride, Martha trying to cook and burning everything, Martha delivering Maggie during a blizzard with only Ethan to help because the doctor couldn't get through. She was the strongest woman I ever knew, he said, and the most fragile. I never understood how both could be true until it was too late. Mary Lou thought of the letters, the words about melancholy and darkness. Maggie mentioned she struggled after Ellie was born. Ethan's jaw tightened.
She did. Doc called it mother's melancholy. Said it would pass, but it didn't, not really. She'd have good days, even good weeks. Then something would trigger it, and she'd disappear inside herself again. He looked at Mary Lou then. Really looked at her. I tried everything. Hired help for the house so she could rest. Took her to town for socials. Brought her little gifts. Nothing helped for long. And then the cough started, and she just gave up, like she'd been waiting for an excuse to stop fighting. Papa,
Maggie whispered, stricken.
I'm sorry. Magpie, I shouldn't—
No, Mary Lou interrupted.
She needs to hear this, to understand.
She looked at Maggie.
Your mama was sick in 2 ways. Her body and her mind.
Neither one was her fault or your papa's fault or anyone's fault. Sometimes life is just hard, and people break under the weight. but that doesn't mean she loved you any less." "That's right," Ethan said roughly. "She loved you girls more than anything, even when she couldn't show it the way she wanted." They were quiet for a moment, each lost in thought. Then Ellie's voice drifted up from below. "Where is everybody?" "Up here, little one," Ethan called. "Come on up." Soon, Ellie had joined them, crawling into Ethan's lap and examining the treasures with 4-year-old wonder. The heavy mood lifted somewhat as she exclaimed over each item.
"Can I have this?"
she asked, holding up a lace handkerchief. "Of course," Ethan said. I think Mama would want you girls to have her things, to use them, not hide them away." As the afternoon light slanted lower, they carefully repacked the chest, but not everything went back. Maggie kept the brush, Ellie clutched the handkerchief, and Ethan, after a moment's hesitation, pulled out a small leather journal. "Her diary," he explained. "From when we were courting, maybe it's time I read it. Remember the happy times before the sadness took hold." They made their way downstairs, the girls running ahead to help with supper preparations. Ethan caught Mary Lou's arm gently. "Thank you," he said, "for being there when they found it, for knowing what to say." "I didn't do anything special." "You did." He was standing close enough that she could see the gold flecks in his brown eyes. "You helped them understand their mother without judging her. That's something I haven't been able to do. Too much guilt, I suppose."
"Ethan,"
she touched his arm. "You can't blame yourself for her illness." "Can't I? I was her husband. I should have protected her, even from herself." "That's not how it works. You can't love someone out of melancholy any more than you can love them out of lung fever. You did your best with what you knew." He covered her hand with his, and for a moment they stood there in the narrow hallway, surrounded by the whispers of the past but very much in the present. "You're good for us," he said quietly. "For all of us. Martha would have liked you. I think would have been glad to know someone like you was caring for her girls." "They're easy to care for," Mary Lou said, her voice not quite steady. "Mary Lou, He stopped, struggled, started again. "These past weeks, since the fire, I've been thinking about the future, about what the girls need, what I need." Her heart was pounding so hard she was sure he could hear it. "What do you need?"
"I need—"
"Papa, Miss Mary Lou, the biscuits are burning." The spell broke. They rushed to the kitchen to save what they could of supper, and the moment was lost in the chaos of smoke and laughter and slightly scorched biscuits. But later that evening, as Mary Lou read to the girls before bed, they were halfway through Robinson Crusoe now. She caught Ethan watching them from the doorway. In his hands was Martha's journal, but he wasn't reading. He was looking at the three of them curled together on the sofa, and his expression made her breath catch. After the girls were tucked in, Mary Lou found him on the porch as usual, but tonight the journal lay open on his lap. "Find anything?" she asked, settling beside him. "Listen to this," he said, and read. "Ethan brought me wildflowers today, roots and all, because he didn't want them to die. I laughed and told him that's not how flowers work, but he said he'd rather give me something that could grow than something already dying. I think I'm going to marry this man." Mary Lou smiled. She was right about you wanting things to grow rather than fade.
"I loved her,"
Ethan said simply. "I'll always love who she was before the darkness took hold, but I can't live in that shadow forever. The girls can't." He closed the journal carefully. "She wrote about wanting us to be happy. If something happened to her, she wanted us to find joy again. I thought it was just the melancholy talking, but maybe she knew something we didn't. Maybe she just loved you enough to want your happiness more than her own memory." Mary Lou suggested. Ethan turned to her then, and in the moonlight, his face was both young and ancient. "What would make you happy? Mary Lou, if you could have anything, The question caught her off guard. I have more now than I ever expected. A home, work I enjoy, children who—" She stopped, realizing what she'd been about to say. "Children who love you," Ethan finished. "Because they do, and their father—" He reached out, slowly, giving her time to pull away. His fingers touched her scarred palm, tracing the marks left by the fire. "Their father what?" she whispered. "Is falling in love with a woman who ran into flames for a horse, who tends his daughter's hearts as carefully as she tends the garden, who brings light into a house that had forgotten what sunshine looked like." "Ethan, I know there are obstacles. I know people will talk. I know you have scars that go deeper than these." His fingers still traced her palm. "But Mary Lou, I'm asking you to think about it. About the possibility of staying not as hired help but as family. Real family." She couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. Everything she'd never dared hope for was being offered, and she was terrified. "I don't need an answer tonight," he said gently. "Or even soon. Just think about it. Think about what would make you happy." He stood, leaving her on the porch with her thoughts spinning like leaves in a windstorm. At the door, he paused. "Martha's journal, she wrote about you, in a way, not you specifically, but she wrote about hoping I'd find someone who could make me laugh again. Someone who'd love the girls for themselves, not as a duty. Someone strong enough to weather the storms that come with this life." He smiled slightly. "I think she would have chosen you herself." After he went inside, Mary Lou sat alone in the darkness, her scarred hands folded in her lap. The night was full of small sounds: crickets, a distant owl, the creak of the house settling. Normal sounds of a life she'd somehow stumbled into. She thought about Martha, fighting her private battles with melancholy. About Ethan, carrying guilt for something he couldn't have prevented. About the girls, growing up with a shadow of loss but still able to love, to trust, to welcome a stranger into their hearts. And she thought about herself, the woman who'd arrived here broken and running, convinced she was worthless. That woman seemed like a stranger now. In her place was someone who ran into burning barns, who coaxed vegetables from reluctant soil, who read stories and soothed nightmares and was being offered a love she'd never dreamed possible. What would make her happy? The question echoed in the night air. This, she realized, this exact life, with all its complications and ghosts and possibilities. This man who saw her truly, these children who trusted her completely, this land that had become home when she wasn't looking. Tomorrow she'd have to face the practicalities, the gossips, Silas's lingering threats, the very real challenges of stepping from employee to wife. But tonight, sitting on the porch of a house where she was wanted, where she was valued, where she was loved. Tonight, Mary Lou Barrett was already happy. The moon rose higher, painting the ranch in silver, in the house behind her. Her family, yes, hers. She could think it now, slept peacefully. And on the night air, she could almost swear she smelled lavender and roses, as if Martha herself was giving her blessing. "Thank you," she whispered to the ghost of a woman she'd never met but had come to understand. "I'll take care of them. All of them. I promise." The wind sighed through the cottonwoods, and Mary Lou took it as an answer. She rose, touching her scarred palm to her heart, and went inside to the home that was waiting for her to claim it. The user wants me to write part 7 of the story following the outline. According to the outline, part 7 is about a courthouse trial where Silas sues, claiming Mary Lou is unfit to be a stepmother and demands custody be given to the maternal grandparents. Ethan stands up in court to defend Mary Lou, telling the truth and advocating for her. The townspeople gradually change their minds. I need to write 2,000 to 2,500 words. Use period-appropriate American names, 1850 to 1900. Keep content YouTube-friendly. Focus on the courtroom drama and resolution. Show Ethan's public defense of Mary Lou. Include the community's changing perception. The outline mentions Clara and Ellie as the children, but the user specifically said not to use the name Clara. I've been using Maggie and Ellie consistently throughout the story, so I'll continue with those names. The courthouse in Willow Creek had seen its share of disputes, land claims, cattle rustling, the occasional drunken brawl that got out of hand, but nothing quite like this. Word had spread quickly through town that Silas Whitlow had filed papers with Judge Harrison, demanding a hearing about the moral welfare of the Callahan children. Mary Lou stood beside Ethan outside the courthouse, her hands trembling despite the warm October morning. She'd worn her best dress, the one she'd sewn from fabric Ethan had brought from town, respectable brown wool with small pearl buttons. Still, she felt exposed, as if everyone could see through to all her shame and secrets.
"We don't have to do this,"
Ethan said quietly.
"I could settle with him, pay him to leave."
"No." Mary Lou straightened her spine.
"Running and paying people off, that's what I've always done. It has to stop somewhere."
"Then we face it together." He offered her his arm, and after a moment's hesitation, she took it. The courthouse was packed. It seemed every soul in 50 miles had come to witness the scandal. Mrs. Powell sat in the front row, her expression triumphant. Behind her, the usual gossips whispered behind gloved hands. But there were friendly faces too. Mrs. Morrison, who'd tended Mary Lou's burns, Tom Bradley, whose barn-raising Ethan had helped with last month. The preacher and his wife, looking uncomfortable but present. Judge Harrison, a stern man in his 60s with silver sideburns, called the proceedings to order. "This is a custody hearing regarding the minor children of Ethan Callahan, Mr. Whitlow. State your case." Silas rose, dressed in a fine suit that made him look almost respectable. "Your Honor, I come before you as a concerned citizen. Mr. Callahan has taken into his home to care for his innocent daughters, a woman of questionable character." "Objection to the characterization," said Mr. Davies, the lawyer Ethan had hired from Cheyenne. "Overruled. Continue. Mr. Whitlow. Mary Lou Barrett worked in my establishment in Kansas, a boarding house, Your Honor, though I'll be frank about what kind of boarding house it was." He paused for effect. "The kind where women entertain men for money." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Mary Lou kept her eyes fixed on the judge's bench, feeling the weight of every stare.
"She lived there for 3 years.
Silas continued. "Worked there willingly,
I might add, despite her claims otherwise. Then she ran off in the night, stealing from me and leaving debts unpaid. Is this the kind of woman who should be raising innocent children?"
"Your proof?" Judge Harrison asked. Silas produced papers, ledgers, he claimed, showing Mary Lou's employment and debts. Mary Lou recognized them as forgeries, but how could she prove it? "Furthermore," Silas said, warming to his performance, "I've learned that the children's maternal grandparents, George and Agnes Morrison of Denver, are respectable people who would gladly take custody. Surely the girls would be better off with blood relatives than with a fallen woman." "That's enough." Ethan started to rise, but his lawyer held him back. "Mr. Davies, your response." The lawyer stood. "Your Honor, we dispute every claim made by Mr. Whitlow. Miss Barrett is a woman of good character who has cared admirably for the Callahan children.
As for the grandparents, they haven't seen the girls since Mrs. Callahan's funeral. They've shown no interest until now.
Perhaps because they didn't know their granddaughters were being exposed to moral corruption." Silas interjected. Mr. Whitlow, you'll have your turn," the judge warned. The morning wore on with testimonies and arguments. Silas painted a picture of Mary Lou as a scheming woman who'd targeted a vulnerable widower. The lawyer tried to counter, but without proof of Silas's lies. It was word against word. Then Judge Harrison called a noon recess, and Mary Lou thought she might collapse. In the small room set aside for them, she sank into a chair.
"I should leave,"
she said.
"Today, before this gets worse. The girls.
The girls need you, Ethan interrupted, and we're not done yet.
Ethan, you heard him.
The whole town thinks... I don't care what they think. He knelt before her, taking her hands. I care what I know, what the girls know.
Mr. Callahan, the lawyer said, I think it might be time for you to testify. Your word carries weight in this community.
When court resumed, Ethan took the stand. Mary Lou had never seen him in his Sunday suit, hadn't known he could look so imposing. He sat straight, hands steady, meeting the judge's eyes directly. Mr. Callahan, his lawyer began. Tell us about hiring Miss Barrett.
I found her by the old church during a dust storm. She was alone, hungry, had nowhere to go. My girls needed care, and I needed help. It seemed providential. And her work?
Exemplary. She cooks, cleans, teaches the girls their letters. She's brought order to our home and joy back to my daughters.
What about her moral character?
Ethan's jaw tightened. I'll tell you about moral character. When my barn caught fire, mysteriously, I might add, right after Mr. Whitlow's first visit, Miss Barrett ran into those flames to save my late wife's horse. She burned her hands badly doing it. You know why? Because she couldn't bear for my girls to lose one more thing they loved.
He held up his hand before anyone could interrupt.
I'm not finished. You want to know about character? She tends my Martha's garden, teaching the girls that beautiful things can grow after loss. She reads to them every night, holds them through nightmares, patches their clothes and their hearts with equal care. But her past, Silas began. Your Honor, Ethan said, turning to the judge.
May I speak freely?
Judge Harrison nodded. Ethan stood, commanding the room.
I know exactly what Mary Lou's past contains. A young woman, orphaned and alone, who was promised marriage by a man who lied, who was trapped in a situation not of her making and fought to escape it, who has been running ever since, trying to build a decent life despite men like Whitlow hunting her down.
He looked directly at Silas. You want to talk about moral character. What about a man who preys on desperate young women, who uses promises of marriage to lure them into bondage, who pursues them across territories when they dare to escape?
Those are serious accusations.
The judge said, Yes, they are. And I have proof. Ethan reached into his jacket. Letters from 3 other women who escaped Mr. Whitlow's boarding house. Women willing to testify about his methods if needed. My lawyer tracked them down this week. The courtroom erupted. Silas jumped to his feet.
Those women are liars and...
Careful, Ethan warned. You're about to slander respectable married women. One is a school teacher in Nebraska. Another runs a mercantile with her husband in Colorado. Should I continue? Silas's face had gone pale. Your Honor, Ethan continued, turning back to the judge. I'm not eloquent like lawyers, but I know this Mary Lou Barrett came to us broken and scared. In the months since, she's proven herself brave, kind, and true. My girls love her. He paused, then squared his shoulders. I love her. I intend to marry her if she'll have me. More gasps. Mary Lou's hand flew to her mouth.
As for the Morrison grandparents, they're welcome to visit any time, but my girls belong at home, with their father and the woman who's become their mother in all but name.
This is outrageous, Silas sputtered.
Your Honor, surely you can't...
Mr. Whitlow, Judge Harrison interrupted. I've heard enough. It seems to me you're the one with questionable character here. These custody proceedings are dismissed. The children remain with their father. But, furthermore, I strongly suggest you leave this county immediately. If I hear of you harassing Miss Barrett or any other woman again, I'll personally ensure you're prosecuted to the full extent of the law. The judge's gavel came down with finality. For a moment, silence reigned. Then Tom Bradley stood up in the back. About time someone stood up to bullies like him. He started clapping. Mrs. Morrison joined him, Then the preacher. One by one, people throughout the courtroom stood and applauded. Not all, but enough. Even some who'd whispered about Mary Lou were nodding approval. Silas fled, pushing through the crowd with none of his earlier swagger. Mrs. Powell sat frozen, her triumph turned to ash. Mary Lou found herself surrounded by well-wishers. Women who'd kept their distance now pressed her hand, murmuring apologies and congratulations. Men shook Ethan's hand, praising his courage.
"Did you mean it?"
she whispered when they finally had a moment alone.
"About marriage?"
"Every word," he said, "though I'd planned to propose more privately. Sorry about that."
"Don't be."
She touched his face, not caring who saw.
"It was perfect. You were perfect."
"Miss Mary Lou, Miss Mary Lou." Maggie and Ellie burst through the crowd, having been kept outside during the proceedings. "Mrs. Bradley says you won, says that bad man has to leave forever."
"That's right,"
Mary Lou said, kneeling to embrace them.
"He's gone. And Papa says you're going to marry him and be our real mama,"
Ellie added. Mary Lou looked up at Ethan, who was actually blushing.
"Well, I haven't said yes yet."
"Why not?" Maggie demanded. "Yes, why not?" Ethan echoed, grinning now. "You have to ask properly," Mary Lou said, standing. "A girl has her standards." Right there, in front of half the county, Ethan Callahan dropped to one knee. "Mary Lou Barrett, you've brought life back to my home and light back to my heart. You've mothered my children and saved what I thought was lost forever. Will you marry me? Will you let me spend the rest of my days proving that you were never worthless, that you're worth everything?" "Yes," she said, tears streaming down her face.
"Yes, of course, yes."
The courthouse erupted in cheers. Even Judge Harrison was smiling as he made his way over. "I'll be happy to perform the ceremony whenever you're ready." "Soon," Ethan said, standing and pulling Mary Lou close. "Very soon." As they made their way through the crowd, accepting congratulations and dodging questions about wedding plans, Mary Lou marveled at the turn of events. She'd walked in here expecting to lose everything. Instead, she'd gained a future she'd never dared imagine.
"Thank you,"
she said to Ethan as they finally reached the courthouse steps.
"For defending me, for choosing me, for seeing me as more than my past."
"Thank you," he replied, "for being brave enough to stay, for loving my girls, for giving us all a second chance at happiness."
"Papa, can we go home now?"
Ellie asked, tugging at his coat.
"I'm hungry. And Miss Mary Lou promised to teach us to make apple pie today." "Not Miss Mary Lou,"
Maggie corrected importantly.
"She's going to be Mama now."
"Actually," Mary Lou said, "you can call me whatever feels right. Mary Lou, Mama, whatever makes you comfortable."
"Mama,"
Ellie said, trying it out.
"I like it."
"Me too," Maggie agreed. Then, more quietly, "I think our first mama would like it too." "I know she would," Ethan said, his voice rough with emotion. They made their way to the wagon, a family in truth now, if not yet in law. The October sun was warm on their faces, and the sky stretched endless and blue above Wyoming territory. As Ethan helped her into the wagon, Mary Lou caught sight of Mrs. Powell standing alone by the courthouse, her usual group of gossips having deserted her. For a moment, Mary Lou felt pity for the woman whose whole identity seemed built on judging others.
"Mrs. Powell," she called.
"You're welcome at our wedding. Everyone is." The older woman's mouth opened and closed like a landed fish. Then she turned and hurried away without a word. "That was kind," Ethan said as he took up the reins. "Everyone deserves a second chance," Mary Lou said. "Even the Mrs. Powells of the world." "Speaking of second chances," Ethan said as they rolled out of town, "what do you think about adding to our family someday? The girls would love a little brother or sister." Mary Lou blushed, but smiled. "One thing at a time, Mr. Callahan. We haven't even set a wedding date yet."
"How about tomorrow?"
"Ethan, next week,"
You're impossible. I'm in love, he corrected. And I've waited long enough to start our life together properly. 2 weeks, Mary Lou bargained. I need time to make a dress, and the girls need new dresses too, and we should probably rebuild the barn first. The barn can wait, Ethan said firmly. Our family can't. As they drove home, the girls chattering excitedly about wedding plans and what to call their new grandparents when they visited, Mary Lou let herself fully feel the joy of this moment. She'd come to Wyoming territory as a woman without worth, running from a past that haunted her. But somewhere between that dust storm and this sunshine, she'd found her value, not in what others said about her, but in the love she gave and received. The road home stretched before them, familiar now but somehow new. Everything was the same, the mountains in the distance, the cottonwoods along the creek, the ranch buildings waiting for their return. But everything was different too. She was no longer the hired help. She was chosen, defended, loved. She was going to be a wife, a mother, a partner in building this life. As they turned into the ranch gate, Mary Lou saw the garden, their garden now rich with autumn vegetables ready for harvest. The new barn was taking shape thanks to the neighbors' help. And there on the porch sat the rocking chair Ethan had made, waiting for evening stories and quiet conversations. Home, family, future. All the things she'd thought were lost to her forever, now hers to claim. Welcome home, Mrs. Callahan-to-be, Ethan said, helping her down from the wagon. Not yet, she laughed, but soon. Very soon, he agreed, stealing a quick kiss while the girls giggled. And as they walked into the house together, Mary Lou thought she felt Martha's blessing in the autumn breeze, in the warm sun, in the love that filled every corner of this place they'd all chosen to call home. The morning of the wedding dawned clear and crisp, with the kind of October sky that made Wyoming look like heaven had come down to visit. Mary Lou stood in what would soon be her bedroom, not the bunkhouse anymore, but the room she'd share with Ethan, while Maggie and Ellie fussed with her hair. Hold still, Mama, Maggie commanded, wielding her mother's silver brush with determination. We want you to look perfect. You already look perfect, Ellie declared, spinning in her new blue dress. Like a princess, but better because princesses are boring. Mary Lou laughed, catching Ellie mid-spin. Thank you, sweetheart. You both look beautiful too. They did. Mrs. Morrison, the doctor's wife, not the estranged grandmother, had helped sew new dresses for all three of them. Mary Lou's was cream-colored wool with delicate embroidery at the collar and cuffs. Simple but elegant. Nothing like the finery some brides wore. But it was hers, made with love and hope instead of shame. Girls, you ready? Ethan's voice called from downstairs. Folks are starting to arrive. No peeking, Maggie shouted back. It's bad luck. Through the window, Mary Lou could see wagons and riders approaching. Word had spread that the wedding would be held in the garden. Martha's garden, now blooming with late roses and chrysanthemums alongside the practical vegetables. It seemed fitting, this blend of beauty and purpose, past and future. There's so many people, Ellie breathed, peering out. There were more than Mary Lou had expected. The preacher and his wife, of course, the Morrisons and the Bradleys, but also families she'd only met in passing. Cowboys from neighboring ranches, even some of the women who'd whispered about her just weeks ago. They're here for your papa, Mary Lou said, though she wondered if that was entirely true. The scene at the courthouse had shifted something in the community's perception. They're here for you too, Maggie said firmly. Because you're brave, and because Papa loves you, and because you make the best apple pie in the county. Well, when you put it that way, Mary Lou smiled. A knock at the door made them all turn. Ladies, it was Tom Bradley's voice. I'm here to escort the bride, whenever she's ready. Tom had volunteered to walk her down the aisle, since she had no family of her own.
"A woman shouldn't walk alone to her wedding," he'd said gruffly. "Not when she's got neighbors who care about her." 5 more minutes, Mary Lou called, suddenly nervous.
Mama,
Ellie looked up at her with those huge eyes.
are you scared?
"A little," Mary Lou admitted. "Why Papa loves you, we love you. Everybody's happy except mean old Mrs. Powell, and she doesn't count." From the mouths of babes, Mary Lou thought. "You're right. There's nothing to be scared of. Is there?"
Nothing at all,
Maggie agreed. She set down the brush and took Mary Lou's hand. "Ready?" Mary Lou looked at herself in Martha's mirror, the same mirror where another bride had once prepared for a different life. Her reflection showed a woman transformed, not the desperate, frightened girl who'd hidden by an abandoned church, not the worthless virgin Silas had tried to destroy, but a woman who'd found her worth in the choice to love and be loved.
Ready?
She said. The walk downstairs felt both endless and too quick. Tom Bradley waited at the bottom, dressed in his Sunday best, his weathered face kind. "You look lovely, Miss Barrett," he said, offering his arm. "Ethan's a lucky man." "I'm the lucky one," Mary Lou said. "Maybe you both are." Tom suggested. "That's the best kind of marriage, when both folks feel lucky." The back door opened onto a scene from a dream. Chairs had been arranged in the garden, creating an aisle between the vegetables and flowers. Ribbons fluttered from the fence posts. And there, by the rose arbor Ethan had built just this week, stood the man himself. He looked magnificent in his dark suit, freshly shaved, his hair tamed for once. But it was his expression that took Mary Lou's breath. Joy and wonder and love all mixed together as he watched her approach. The preacher, Reverend Mills, smiled warmly as they took their places. The girls stood as attendants, Ellie barely containing her excitement, Maggie trying to look solemn and adult. "Dearly beloved," Reverend Mills began, "we gather today in this garden, a place of growth and renewal, to witness the union of Ethan and Mary Lou. It seems fitting that we celebrate new love where life continuously begins again." Mary Lou barely heard the traditional words. She was lost in Ethan's eyes, in the solid warmth of his hands holding hers, in the miracle of standing here at all. "The couple has written their own vows," the Reverend announced. Ethan cleared his throat, suddenly looking nervous. "Mary Lou, when you came to us, I thought I was just hiring help. I never expected to find healing. You didn't try to replace what we'd lost. You helped us grow something new. You showed my girls that strength can look like gentleness, that broken things can be made beautiful again. You showed me that my heart wasn't buried with my past, but was just waiting for someone brave enough to tend it." He paused, squeezing her hands. "I promise to protect you, not just from the world, but from the voices that tell you you're not enough. I promise to remind you every day that you were never worthless. You're priceless. I promise to choose you, again and again, in sunshine and storm, in plenty and want, in joy and sorrow. You saved us, Mary Lou. Now let us save you right back, every day for the rest of our lives." Mary Lou was crying, not caring who saw. Through her tears, she managed her own vows. "Ethan, I came here with nothing but shame and fear. You gave me shelter, but more than that, you gave me purpose. You trusted me with your most precious treasures, your daughters, your home, your heart. You stood between me and my past, declaring me worthy when the whole world said otherwise." She glanced at the girls, including them in her promise. "I vow to love your daughters as my own, to honor their mother's memory while building our own traditions. I vow to tend this family like I tend the garden, with patience, hope, and endless devotion. I promise to stop running, to plant myself here, to grow deep roots in this soil of second chances. You didn't save me. Ethan, you gave me the space to save myself, and I choose to spend that saved life loving you." "The rings," Reverend Mills prompted. Ellie stepped forward importantly, carrying the simple gold bands on a cushion she'd embroidered herself with significant help from Maggie. As Ethan slipped the ring onto Mary Lou's finger, he said, "With this ring, I claim you as mine and offer myself as yours." Mary Lou repeated the gesture, her voice steady now. "With this ring, I bind my life to yours and welcome the binding. Then, by the power vested in me by God and the territory of Wyoming, I pronounce you husband and wife. Ethan, you may kiss your bride." The kiss was gentle, appropriate for public viewing, but it held promises of deeper intimacies to come. The gathering erupted in cheers and applause. "Ladies and gentlemen," Reverend Mills announced, "may I present Mr. and Mrs. Ethan Callahan." The name hit Mary Lou like a gift. She had a name now that no one could take away, a place that was hers by right and choice and love. The celebration that followed was simple but joyful. Tables had been set up in the yard, laden with food brought by neighbors. Mrs. Morrison had made the cake 3 layers with real sugar frosting. Tom Bradley had contributed cider from his apple trees. Even some unexpected guests had brought gifts. A quilt from women who'd snubbed her just weeks ago. Preserves from families she'd never formally met. "I believe you've won them over," Ethan murmured as they made their rounds, accepting congratulations. "We won them over," Mary Lou corrected. "Your courage at the courthouse changed minds." "Our courage," he said, pulling her closer. "We're a team now, remember?" As the sun began to sink toward the mountains, painting the sky in shades of rose and gold, the preacher called for attention. "Before we end this celebration, the bride and groom have asked me to read something." He pulled out a worn piece of paper. This was found in Martha Callahan's Bible, written in her hand. The family felt it was appropriate to share today. Mary Lou tensed, but Ethan's hand on hers was steady. "If you're reading this," the preacher read, "then I'm gone and you're grieving. Stop it. Well, grieve a little. I was wonderful. After all..." Gentle laughter rippled through the crowd. "But then stop. Find joy again. Find love again, Ethan, you stubborn man. Don't you dare waste years feeling guilty. I had darkness in me that wasn't your fault or anyone's. Love our girls. Love yourself. And when the right woman comes along, and you'll know her by how the girls take to her, love her with your whole heart. Make new memories in our house. Plant new things in my garden. Live, truly live, for all of us." The preacher folded the paper. "It seems to me that Martha's wishes have been beautifully fulfilled today." There wasn't a dry eye in the garden. Even Mrs. Powell, who'd come despite Mary Lou's invitation seeming to shock her, was dabbing at her cheeks. As the stars began to appear, guests slowly took their leave. The girls, exhausted from excitement, were put to bed in their room with promises that, yes, Mama would still be there in the morning, and every morning after. Finally, it was just Ethan and Mary Lou in the garden, surrounded by the remnants of celebration and the quiet of evening. "No regrets?" he asked, pulling her close. "How could I regret the best day of my life? Even though it came with instant motherhood, a ranch to help run, and a husband who's still learning how to live again. Especially because of all that," Mary Lou said. "I don't want easy. Ethan, I want real. I want challenges we face together and victories we share. I want little feet running through the house and big dreams growing in this soil." Speaking of growing things, he led her to a corner of the garden she hadn't noticed before, where a new rose bush had been planted. "I put this in this morning. Thought we should have something that was just ours, not Martha's garden anymore, but the Callahan family garden." "It's perfect," she whispered. They stood there as the moon rose, 2 people who'd found each other through loss and pain and the simple need for help. Tomorrow would bring work. There was always work on a ranch. The girls would need breakfast. Animals would need tending. Life would go on in its ordinary, extraordinary way. But tonight, Mary Lou Barrett Callahan was exactly where she belonged. Not because she'd been rescued or saved or chosen by default, but because she'd been brave enough to stay, to love, to believe she was worthy of this happiness. "What are you thinking?" Ethan asked.
"That I'm home," she said simply. "That I'm finally, truly home."
He kissed her then, under the stars and surrounded by roses. And Mary Lou knew that all the running, all the pain, all the nights of desperation had led to this moment. She'd been called worthless, but love had named her precious. She'd been marked as damaged, but grace had declared her whole. In the house, a child coughed. Ellie, always prone to night coughs. Without hesitation, Mary Lou turned toward the sound, ready to soothe and comfort. "I'll come with you," Ethan said. "We're parents," she marveled. "Real parents." "The realest," he agreed. Hand in hand, they walked into their house, their life, their future, behind them. The garden slept under starlight, ready to grow new things come spring, and in the warmth of the kitchen, where so much had begun with a desperate woman and a kind man's offer of shelter, a new chapter started with love, laughter, and the promise of all the tomorrows to come. The end. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I'd love to know where you're listening from. Please share in the comments below so we can connect and discuss what touched you most about Mary Lou and Ethan's journey. If you enjoyed this tale of love, redemption, and second chances in the Old West, please subscribe to Wild West Night for more heartfelt historical romances. Don't forget to like this video and hit the hype button to help more people discover this story. Your support means the world and helps keep these tales of the frontier alive.